Don't go anywhere. Hit that subscribe button. Tap the notification bell and be the first to know when we drop a new video. Like and share with your fellow American patriots who love this country. And if you haven't even an American patriot, you're someone who believe and love freedom, love democracy, truth, and don't like corruption, hit the subscription button.
Donald Trump's illegal tariffs are gone, thanks to a ruling of the United States Court of International Trade. Futures trading is now soaring tonight in the expectation of an explosively positive reaction by the stock market tomorrow when the world will reset itself around the restoration of law and order in international trade and the crushing of the Trump tariffs and resultant personal, worldwide humiliation of Donald Trump. The Trump tariffs were always illegal and unconstitutional, and you heard that on this program every time we covered Donald Trump's comments about tariffs, including very much during the presidential campaign when the campaign press corps never ever reported to voters that the Trump proposed tariffs during the campaign were completely illegal and unconstitutional. The campaign press corps never reported to voters that those proposals were constitutionally insane, and the person pronouncing those proposals at those Trump rallies was constitutionally out of his mind just based on what he was saying about tariffs alone. The campaign press corps completely failed the American voter on this issue, with American voters just discovering tonight from the International Court of Trade just how illegal and unconstitutional the Trump tariffs always have been.
A secret vampire is about to inherit a legendary weapon. Quinn is more powerful than everyone at his school, but
The United States Court of International Trade, which has exclusive jurisdiction over cases involving tariff disputes, has ruled unanimously that when it comes to tariffs, Donald Trump does not have, quote, unbounded authority, and the court sets aside the challenged tariffs. The court gave the plaintiffs suing the Trump administration even more than they expected. The plaintiffs include 12 states with Democratic governors who sued, arguing that the Trump tariffs are unconstitutional and illegal, and asked the court for at least a temporary injunction, temporarily blocking the tariffs. But the court went all the way and delivered a full and final ruling in the case, granting what the court calls a summary judgment against Donald Trump and all of his tariffs. So as of this hour tonight, it is no longer legal at any port of entry in the United States for a United States Customs Service to collect a single dollar of Trump tariffs. Civil lawsuits like this seldom have such total and complete and final victories just 2 weeks after the court heard arguments in the case. Victories in this case for plaintiffs at this stage of this kind of litigation are very unusual, but here we are. And as I've been reporting to you literally for years now, there are few things more clear in law than Congress's complete authority over tariffs. The Court of International Trade said in its opinion that even if Congress wanted to give Donald Trump power over tariffs, it would be unconstitutional to do so. Quote, an unlimited delegation of tariff authority would constitute an improper abdication of legislative power to another branch of government. Donald Trump's illegal tariffs were based on the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977, and today, finally, the Court of International Trade said what I've been saying since the day Donald Trump invoked that law to support his tariffs. Quote, any interpretation of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act that delegates unlimited tariff authority is unconstitutional. The court rejected Donald Trump's claim of a national emergency to justify his tariffs, saying the mere incantation of national emergency cannot, of course, sound the death knell of the Constitution. And that's what Donald Trump is trying to do. He's trying to kill the Constitution of the United States in a different way every day. he tried and failed, thanks to the Court of International Trade, to sound the death knell of the Constitution by stealing Congress's exclusive power over tariffs. And in a 49-page ruling co-authored by 3 judges of the Court of International Trade in New York City, Donald Trump's attempts to kill the Constitution this time have failed. Judge Gary Katzman was appointed by President Obama. Judge Jane Rustani was appointed by Republican President Ronald Reagan. Judge Timothy Reif was appointed by Republican President Donald Trump. And those 3 judges unanimously agreed to every word in tonight's breaking news opinion that there is nothing in American law that can make Donald Trump's tariffs legal. 2 sets of plaintiffs brought cases to the Court of International Trade, and in their unanimous opinion tonight, the court said, the question in the 2 cases before the court is whether the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977 delegates these powers to the President in the form of authority to impose unlimited tariffs on goods from nearly every country in the world. The court does not read the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to confer such unbounded authority and sets aside the challenged tariffs imposed thereunder. For Donald Trump's benefit, though he, of course, could never actually read a single page of a court opinion, but mostly for the benefit of the United States Supreme Court, the trade experts on the Court of International Trade wrote a brief history of international trade right in their opinion, and a brief history of international trade law for Donald Trump's Supreme Court justices to study, because they know very little about international trade law. When Donald Trump, no doubt, appeals this case all the way up to the judges on the Supreme Court who he believes owe him their permanent loyalty. The trade court identified 3 different kinds of tariffs Donald Trump was illegally imposing and ruled against each of them, calling each of them illegal and unconstitutional. The court referred to tariffs imposed on countries to indirectly force them to somehow stop the flow of fentanyl around the world and other illicit drugs that are illegal, because tariffs cannot legally be used to leverage the behavior of other governments on issues other than regulated international trade. The court wrote, a tax deals with a budget deficit by raising revenue. A dam deals with flooding by holding back a river. But there is no such association between the act of imposing a tariff and the unusual and extraordinary threats that the trafficking orders purport to combat. The trafficking orders do not deal with their stated objectives. Rather, as the government acknowledges, the orders aim to create leverage to deal with those objectives. That use is impermissible, not because it is unwise or ineffective, but because Section 1701 does not allow it. The court laid out the legal specifics, striking down all of what Donald Trump calls his reciprocal tariffs. And throughout the opinion, the court was very clear that Congress would have the authority to impose any of these tariffs, but the president simply does not have that legal authority. In the same sense that the president does have the power to pardon people convicted of federal crimes, which Donald Trump is doing in the most corrupt manner in history, but Congress does not have the power to pardon people convicted of federal crimes. These distinctions in presidential and congressional power have always been easy and simple for people to understand, and no one has ever disputed them, just as no one has ever imagined prior to Donald Trump that a president has the authority to raise or lower tariffs. The court went through a painful recitation of all the tariffs Donald Trump has threatened to impose and then reduced and then postponed, saying every one of those decisions was made illegally. The court explained that a summary judgment is the only possible way in this case that this case can be resolved and needs to be resolved now. And this court explained the standards for a summary judgment, saying the court shall grant summary judgment if the movement shows that there is no genuine dispute as to any material fact and the movement is entitled to judgment as a matter of law. That is a very high bar, but Donald Trump's constitutional illiteracy easily delivered a summary judgment to the states and other plaintiffs to end all of the Trump tariffs and not allow them to be collected at any port of entry anywhere in the United States. The court, of course, cited James Madison, writing in the Federalist Papers, on the importance of separation of powers and said an unlimited delegation of tariff authority would be unconstitutional. The court said, quote, "The president's assertion of authority here has no meaningful limiting standards, essentially enabling him to impose any tariff rate he wants on any country at any time for virtually any reason." The court stopped that madness tonight. It's over. The Trump tariff madness ends now. The court said Donald Trump's attempt to use our international trade balance of payments with countries around the world as a reason for a president to impose tariffs was illegal and unconstitutional. Donald Trump has lost in court many times before, most notably in the 34 guilty verdicts returned against him by a jury of his peers in a criminal case in Manhattan last year. And the judgment against Donald Trump by the Court of International Trade will now take its place among those legal cases in which Donald Trump has lost, and lost decisively on every single point that Donald Trump raised in the court. There is not a single word that was said by Donald Trump's lawyers justifying his tariffs that was accepted by a single judge on the Court of International Trade, including the Trump-appointed judge who joined this unanimous opinion. And so tomorrow, when Donald Trump stands before a microphone and lies to the American people about his tariffs, it will be another worldwide humiliation day for Donald Trump.
Join me as I dive deep into Trump's shocking loophole and see if I can uncover the truth behind it. You might have heard about the various controversies surrounding former President Donald Trump, but today we're focusing on a specific loophole that's raised quite a few eyebrows. This loophole has been a topic of discussion among politicians, legal experts, and the general public, and for good reason. It seems to have allowed Trump to sidestep certain financial regulations, sparking debates about fairness and accountability. The challenges posed by this loophole are multifaceted. On one hand, it has led to questions about the integrity of the financial system and how some individuals might be able to exploit it for their own gain. On the other hand, it affects public perception of Trump and his business dealings, with many wondering if he's been given preferential treatment. Furthermore, this loophole has ramifications for policy, as it highlights potential gaps that need to be addressed to prevent similar situations in the future. The public's concern about these issues is understandable, given the influence Trump still holds in American politics. The ramifications of this loophole extend beyond just Trump's personal financial situation. They touch on broader issues of economic inequality, political favoritism, and the accountability of those in power. When certain individuals seem to be operating under different rules than everyone else, it erodes trust in institutions and can lead to social unrest. Therefore, understanding the intricacies of this loophole is crucial for anyone interested in the political and economic landscape of the United States. Delving into the specifics, the loophole in question relates to Trump's use of a particular financial mechanism that has allowed him to keep certain financial details private. This mechanism, while legal, has raised questions about transparency and whether it was used to shield his financial dealings from public scrutiny. To understand its significance, let's consider an example. Suppose a businessperson uses a complex financial structure to hide debts or assets. This not only complicates their financial picture but also makes it difficult for regulators and the public to assess their financial health accurately. The use of such loopholes can have far-reaching implications. For instance, if a public figure or a politician can obscure their financial information, it can lead to suspicions of impropriety or even corruption. This can undermine the public's trust in their leaders and the systems that are supposed to govern them. Therefore, it's essential to examine these financial mechanisms closely and assess their impact on governance and public trust. Highlighting the most compelling evidence, a critical piece of information that sheds light on Trump's use of this loophole comes from a detailed financial analysis conducted by a reputable news organization. This analysis revealed discrepancies in Trump's financial statements that suggested a more complex financial situation than what was publicly disclosed. The evidence points to a deliberate attempt to utilize the loophole for maximum benefit, raising questions about compliance with the law and ethical standards. Another crucial aspect to consider is the reaction of various stakeholders, including legal experts and politicians, who have voiced concerns about the implications of this loophole. Their insights provide a deeper understanding of the systemic issues at play and the need for regulatory reform. The debate surrounding this loophole highlights the tension between legal financial maneuvering and the ethical expectations of public figures. The most engaging part of this story, however, is how this loophole reflects broader systemic issues within American politics and finance. It illustrates a continuing challenge in balancing the need for privacy in financial matters with the public's right to know about the financial dealings of their leaders. The intrigue around Trump's financial dealings serves as a microcosm of a larger conversation about transparency, accountability, and fairness in the U.S. political system. To recap, Trump's shocking loophole not only reveals complexities in financial regulations but also underscores significant concerns about transparency and accountability among public figures. Understanding such loopholes is vital for grasping the nuances of American politics and the ongoing debates about fairness and governance. If you have thoughts on this topic or similar issues, please leave them in the comments below. Also, if you're interested in more content like this, be sure to check out our video on another controversial political loophole that's been making headlines.
So those of you who have been watching Donald Trump all these years will know that Donald Trump is, nothing but a men baby. Yeah, Donald Trump is a men baby. Everything he cries once he's not getting his way. Having tantrum. Until, the people even start, even around the world after the court has ruled against him, everyone was literally laughing at him, making mockery of him. So, another court came to his aid and help him. So the ability of, Donald Trump to reimpose tariffs after courts have ruled against them in a complex issue rooted in separation of power in the U.S. government and the specific legal authorities granted to the executive branch. So here's an in-depth explanation of how this can happen, particularly with reference to Donald Trump's actions. One, so we go to the legal basis of presidential tariff authority. The U.S. Constitution grants Congress the explicit power to lay and collect taxes, duties, impose on excises, and to regulate commerce with foreign nations. However, over time, Congress has delegated significant authority to the president to impose tariffs under specific circumstances. These statutes include Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, which allowed the president to impose tariffs on imports found to threaten national security. The Commerce Department conducts an investigation to determine if such a threat exists. Then you have Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974. This grants the U.S. Trade Representative, USTR, authority to investigate and take action, including tariffs against foreign countries engaging in unfair trade practices. International Emergency Economic Powers, HAC, IEEPA of 1977. This law allows the president to declare a national emergency in response to unusual and extraordinary threats to national security, foreign policies, or the economy, and then take economic measures, including regulating or prohibiting imports. 2. The recent court rulings against Trump's tariffs in late May 2025, 2 significant rulings challenged President Trump's use of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to impose broad-based tariffs, particularly those related to trade deficits and fentanyl. So this thing that Donald Trump imposed on the American people is literally a tax, and he's taxing them to pay for his tax cut for the billionaires. But you have to understand, you can't, one thing, you never try to fix a fool, because a fool will eat you. Most of the people that voted for Donald Trump, they have a grade 3 level education, so they can't think. All they have to do is give them, raw meat and them just eat it up. That's how it is. So the U.S. Court of International Trade, that a CIT ruling, a 3-judge panel unanimously ruled that Trump exceeded his authority under IEEPA. That's the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. The court found that IEEPA does not grant unbound authority to impose widespread tariffs as a tool for general trade policy or to address trade deficits. It's emphasized that tariffs imposed on the IEEPA must be limited in scope and duration and directly deal with specific emergency declare. The CIT also questioned the administration's justification for using IEEPA for Liberation Day. Tariffs aim at countries with trade surpluses. The tariffs on Canada and Mexico justified by fentanyl concern, stating that the justification didn't sufficiently relate to tariffs imposed. U.S. District Courts for the District of Columbia ruling. This court went further, suggesting that IEPA may not authorize the imposition of tariffs at all, arguing that tariffs are taxes and the power to tax lies primarily with Congress. This ruling, while more sweeping, was additionally limited to specific plaintiffs, two Thai companies. These rulings were a significant setback as they directly challenged the legal foundation of substantial portion of Trump tariff regime. How Trump was able to reimpose tariff despite the rulings. The term reimpose is in context refers to the tariff effectively remain in place or being quickly reinstated despite adverse lower court rulings. This occurs through several legal and procedural mechanisms, appeals and stays. The most immediate and common mechanism is an appeal. When a lower court rules against the government, the administration can immediately appeal that decision to a higher court. Crucially, they can also request a stay of the lower court's ruling while the appeal is being considered. A stay is temporary, suspends the effect of the lower court orders. In the case of the recent CIT ruling, the Trump administration immediately appealed the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit and successfully secured a temporary stay of the CIT decision. This meant that the IEEPA-based tariff remained in effect while the appeals process unfolded. Similarly, the judges in D.C. case issued a temporary stay on his ruling, providing a short window for the administration to appeal. Limits scope of ruling initially, while the CIT ruling was broad in its reasoning, its immediate practical effect was temporarily suspended by the appeal and stay. The DC ruling, while legally significant initially, apply only to a specific companies that brought the lawsuit. This meant other companies and import were still subject to tariffs. So Donald Trump just ratchet up the thing, and that's where we're at right now.
Join me as I dive into the wild world of tariffs and see if I can figure out whether Trump can really keep them alive despite all these court rulings. Tariffs have been a huge part of Donald Trump's economic strategy, and he's been pretty vocal about using them to get what he wants from other countries. But lately, there have been some court rulings that have put a damper on his plans. The significance of these challenges goes beyond just Trump's presidency. It affects international trade and the economy as a whole. The key challenges Trump faces are pretty substantial. Court rulings have already struck down some of his tariffs, citing that they were imposed without proper congressional approval. These decisions have major implications for Trump's trade policies and could limit his ability to impose tariffs unilaterally. One of the main court cases that has been making waves is the one involving the tariffs on solar panels and washing machines. A U.S. trade court ruled that the tariffs were indeed imposed without proper justification. This ruling set a precedent for future cases, emboldening other companies and countries to challenge Trump's tariffs. Another major challenge for Trump is the ongoing debate over the Tariff Act of 1974, which gives the president authority to impose tariffs in certain circumstances. Trump's team has been arguing that the tariffs are necessary for national security reasons, but critics argue that this is a stretch. If the courts keep ruling against Trump, it could significantly limit his ability to use tariffs as a negotiating tool. The business community is closely watching these developments, as tariffs have a direct impact on their operations and bottom line. The business community is getting anxious about the unpredictability of Trump's trade policies. Companies are having to adapt to changing rules and regulations, which can be costly and time-consuming. The ongoing court battles are only adding to the uncertainty. All these challenges are making it harder for Trump to keep his tariffs alive. There's a pivotal moment coming up that could significantly affect Trump's ability to maintain tariffs. A U.S. court is set to hear a case on the tariffs imposed on Chinese goods. If the court rules against Trump, it could be a major blow to his trade policies. The case involves a challenge to the tariffs imposed on Chinese goods, which Trump has used as leverage in trade negotiations. A ruling against Trump could limit his ability to use tariffs in the future. In recent years, there have been several court rulings that have shaped the legal framework surrounding tariffs. For example, the Court of International Trade has ruled that the tariffs imposed on steel and aluminum imports were lawful. However, other courts have ruled that the tariffs imposed on Chinese goods were not justified. Trump's strategies for defending his tariffs have included arguing that they are necessary for national security reasons. Expert opinions on the matter are divided, with some arguing that Trump's use of tariffs is a legitimate exercise of executive power, while others argue that it is an overreach. The outcome of this case could have major consequences for Trump's trade agenda. If the court rules in Trump's favor, it could embolden him to continue using tariffs aggressively. But if the court rules against him, it could force him to rethink his strategy. A ruling against Trump could also lead to a re-evaluation of the Tariff Act of 1974 and potentially limit the president's authority to impose tariffs. In conclusion, the courts are definitely putting a damper on Trump's tariff plans. The president faces significant challenges in keeping his tariffs alive, from court rulings to international pressure. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. So what do you think? Do you think Trump can keep his tariffs alive despite the court rulings? Let me know in the comments. And if you're interested in more political updates, be sure to check out my other videos.